big. It is bigger.
It is
and
bigger.
It was the tallest building in the world
the
for like
tallest building.
238 years. Big deal. But
the castle.
we're a pretty impressive neighbour. Dominant force on the skyline. It doesn't have to be your bag. You don't have to be interested, but you immediately feel that this is a place of historical significance. The fact that you can walk in those footsteps is just something super special, isn't it? Can you tell I'm a bit passionate? We're the only place in the world where those two documents can be seen side by side. These are things that we should be shouting about. Cuff and Taylor reached out to us. I was just like, absolutely. I live next door and I've had a great evening. But we do take that role really seriously because obviously she was that successful. We brought another dragon to the castle. You know, just get them in. Just get them in.
Welcome to the latest episode of Hey Lincoln. Today we hear from Kim Vickers at Lincoln Castle, where she talks about 1,000 years of history, delivering modern events in a historic setting. And we answer the question, is the castle a cuddle for the community? So, welcome to the latest episode of Hey Lincoln, and today I'm absolutely delighted to have Kim Vickers from Lincoln Castle. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, John. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today.
That's good. So, tell me a little bit about your role at the castle, what you do, what your responsibilities are.
Yeah, so I'm the Culture Services Manager, but I have the strategic responsibility for Lincoln Castle. My role involves overseeing everything that you'd typically see on a day-to-day at the site. But I also oversee the kind of strategic development, so the kind of bigger changes that we enact there. And I've actually been at the castle for over 10 years now.
Wow. Right.
But I have worked for Cultural Services for Lincolnshire County Council for over 20 years, which is quite a feat. And, it's something that I'm particularly proud of saying, actually, that I've been involved in what I do for that period of time.
So was that a passion that you always wanted to work in cultural services? What was your journey to getting that role?
Yeah, so I think lots of people are always inquisitive and curious. How have you managed to be where you are today? It's such an unusual and interesting role. But actually, when I reflect on like my upbringing and my family history, it's actually no surprise. Right. So my mum's family have lived and worked in the county of Lincolnshire right back to the 18th century.
Wow.
Agricultural labourers.
Right.
I did my family tree and I went back and I was just like, okay, there's a real,
so you're a real
deep-rooted connection. My dad is from Sheffield, and as you'd expect, he's a very proud Yorkshireman, very proud of his heritage, an incredible storyteller from when I was growing up. And there's something in the mix of that deep-rooted connection to the county, that sense of pride of place that just came together and really much provided the foundation of, my interests. Right. I did archaeology at the University of Sheffield. The time team kind of interest was there. And I was very fortunate, having left university, to get a job working front of house for the then newly reopened Art and Archaeology Museum, the collection. Right. So that was my first role, actually.
Right.
Was working as a front of house assistant at the Usher Art Gallery. And I think what that did was it really started to build that foundation of what makes up a great visitor experience. There's nothing, I clean the toilets, I maintain the sites, I've been in plant rooms, I've got this really holistic view of the visitor experience. Right. And I think that stood me in good stead and really helped shape the type of leader that I am today. I really speak so passionately about making sure our sites and our heritage are just as inclusive and available to everyone, because it should be. It shouldn't be about, people needing to know in-depth history of a site or a place. For me, it's always been more about getting people in, getting people to develop a connection and a relationship with a site, because that for me is the bread and butter of what we do. That's the value. It absolutely is.
And I think that grounding, having done everything, as you say, from cleaning the toilets to now running cultural services, is so important in leading a team of people who are trying to encourage people in and draw people in.
I've always been a huge advocate for the value of our frontline staff, actually, because, you can have every strategy available in the world, but if the people on the front line who are delivering it aren't engaged, aren't on board, then there's just no point.
It's all a bit of a waste of time.
It is a waste of time.
The contact with the public is so important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I will always advocate and be an ambassador for the work that my team do, because they're just brilliant. And they are the standout feature of every TripAdvisor review. And when I say team, I think it's important that I say that includes the volunteers. We have a really committed group of volunteers. We have the Friends of Lincoln Castle. We have the guides, and they all care, and they're all deeply passionate about the role that they play. And that's seen in the amount of awards that we've received as a site. We take part in Visit England's Mystery Visit. The experience of the staff, they score 100% all the time.
Wow, that's really
and
good.
And I think it's really important that everyone understands the value that those guys bring to the experience and to the site too.
Good. So the castle, I mean, everybody sort of looks to the cathedral as the symbol of the city, but the castle...
Absolutely is. It is big. It is bigger.
It is
bigger. And it was the tallest building in the world for like 238 years.
Yeah.
Big deal.
But the castle...
We're a pretty impressive neighbour.
Yeah, I think so. So just, there may be some people listening who don't know what the history of Lincoln Castle is. So a brief history of the castle, what's its historical significance, and what role do you think it plays in the identity of the city?
Well, I think you've kind of touched on the identity of the city. Where else in the world do you have the mighty Lincoln Cathedral and William the Conqueror's castle? They're such a dominant force on the skyline of the city. It really is a symbol of the city's history and heritage. And Lincoln Castle was built 1068 by William the Conqueror, who recognised the strategic kind of geographical importance of that location. There's great views, believe it or not.
They're incredible views.
Tower tours are very popular. But yeah, great views of the surrounding county. It was established there to kind of rule over the rebellious north. I really like that. I really like the fact that that's the perception. There you go. You see. So it's that military significance. It's also a symbol of, hey guys, the Normans are in charge now. Undeniably such an impressive physical feature on the landscape. And of course, what you've got at Lincoln Castle, what you've got in Lincoln and across the county is just layer upon layer of history. And, I guess most people think, oh yeah, well, that's all underground. But the beauty of our city is that you can see it.
Yeah.
And you can, and you don't have, like I said, you don't have to know infinite amounts of history or dates. It doesn't have to be your bag. You don't have to be interested. But my goodness, you come into the walls of the castle and you immediately feel that this is a place of historical significance. And you can see the cathedral, you can see the Georgian prison building, and you can see the Victorian prison, and you can see the observatory tower. And it just makes for something incredibly, undeniably special. And of course, Lincoln Castle has had a multitude of purposes. It has been at the centre of incredibly historically significant battles. The 1217 Battle of Lincoln was fought on the doorsteps of the castle, you know. It really bears the scars of some of those. And monumental, historically defining moments took place in our city, which I just, you know, and the fact that you can walk in those footsteps is just something super special, isn't it? Can you tell I'm a bit passionate about this?
I can tell you're passionate about it. No, I mean, that's really coming across, and I think that's what's so great about what you do. But you're right.
I'm not a historian, John.
No, but I don't think you need to be.
No.
That's the point. You don't need to be to appreciate these things. And I think you're right, to be able to walk across Castle Square between the cathedral and the castle and think, this is where one of the pivotal battles in England's history took place it is a bit of a unique experience.
Yeah,
really.
and that's what shaped our kind of strapline, 1,000 years of history where it happened. Kings and convicts, power and punishment. And obviously we have the foundational document, the 1215 Magna Carta, which is on loan to us from Lincoln Cathedral. We look after it incredibly well in a bespoke vault, Magna Carta vault. And that is just pivotal. That's pivotal. And we have it on display alongside the 1217 Charter of the Forest. And we're the only place in the world where those two documents can be seen side by side. Likewise, we have the Victorian Prison Chapel. So the Victorian prison was built on the separate system, which was designed to keep criminals away from each other, to support their reform. It didn't work, by the way. It had a short history. It was only working as a prison for like 30 years. But we have this really unique Victorian prison chapel. I don't know whether you must have been in there, John.
I've been in
it speaks a lot of people.
You
can't help but, again, it's that feeling, isn't it? You just go, this feels like an unusual
It's a very
place.
weird experience.
And it's the only place in the world where you will see an original Victorian prison chapel built on a separate system. I mean, these are things that we should be shouting about, you know?
Absolutely.
We often talk lots of meetings about, you know, pride in place, don't we? And we're just like, it's a very difficult thing to measure. You don't know how to necessarily create it. But my goodness, when you share those kind of stories and those kind of important aspects of the city, that's the stuff that people latch onto. That's the stuff that defines people and creates, you know, that pride in place. Yeah.
So, you know, the castle has this incredibly varied and interesting history, and yet today it has to fulfil a number of roles. So, apart from the fact that the court is still there.
Yes.
So obviously it's there for tourists, but it's also there for the local economy, because increasingly the castle has become an event space.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that? How do you bring something like a concert?
I manage it okay, but it is the art of balance, isn't it, within all of this? And you are right. We are a heritage visitor attraction. We are owned and run by Lincolnshire County Council. We operate under a cultural enterprise model, which means that the revenue, the income that we generate, goes back into programming. It goes back into the running of the service. So we have a number of other heritage sites in the city and across the county. So it's a bit of a fine art, really. But I think you absolutely have to acknowledge the role that you have within the community. And I think the biggest, not like learning curve of it, but the biggest experience of that was COVID-19. Because I think was a pivotal moment for us in terms of how we developed as a heritage visitor attraction. You know, we were I think we were the first heritage site to reopen our grounds back in May 2020, because we had this green space. And it was something that was always there and people had access to, but it wasn't necessarily part of how we defined ourselves. And if anything, you know, a decision was made to reopen the castle grounds for the community. And it absolutely fundamentally was the right thing to do, because my goodness, we just became it just really helped us to see the role that we could play with our neighbours, with our community. People were grateful for the opportunity to be able to come out and access the grounds. And for us, it was like, what do we do about this? Because this is actually really fundamental for us now. This has become an important component part of what we do. Previously, we talked about the paid for offer, medieval wall walk, Victorian prism, Magna Carta. But now there was an appreciation and acknowledgement of the value that our just access to the grounds alone could bring to our community. And I think you've got to, for me, the bread and butter has to be an appreciation of and sensitivity around what you do for the community, because ultimately, that's what helps shape and create the experience a tourist has of a place. Yep. If you've got local businesses and neighbours speaking positively about what you do, then that's kind of half the battle won.
Absolutely.
Isn't it? Because then when a tourist comes to Lincoln for the first time, they have a really good experience because everybody's talking positively about the work that you do, the role that you play, and the value that you bring to the area. So yeah, it's fundamental, that community role. And the grounds being free to enter is a integral part of that, actually.
I was going to say, I think one of the things that I've really appreciated in recent years is the fact that the grounds are now open and you can just walk through the castle. If you want to get from the lawn to Castle Square, you can go that way. And I just think that has been such a big bonus for people living. And of course, you have some immediate neighbours. There are people whose houses back onto the castle.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, I think that's probably quite unusual but that must
it's a very unusual setup, isn't it? And I think that's why people migrate to the castle, because you just forget that you're in the midst of a city centre.
Yeah.
There's
it's a very
something
quiet
very
space,
peaceful,
actually. Yeah.
Very peaceful, very reflective. The walls provide, we talk about, it's almost an arm, a cuddle almost.
It's a really lovely
it
way
just
of putting
creates a really unique space in the midst of a busy city.
But that proximity to people's houses must create some real challenges when you've got the concerts, because one of the things that's really come in the last couple of years.
What, John, that was one of the headline, for want of a better word. That was one of the main concerns that we had when we were in those early discussions around bringing more live music to the castle. And that's where we focused a lot of our time and our conversation with the event organizer was, how are we going to manage this? What processes have we got in place to make sure that we do this right? And I have to say, I think the majority are totally on board. I was getting messages going, I live next door and I've had a great evening listening to
a concert.
Yeah. But we do take that role really seriously. It fundamentally shapes what our approach is to bringing more events like that to the city. We have to be good neighbours.
Yes. And I think it's one of the interesting things for me about the castle is the whole variety of events, ranging from live music, which is perhaps a bit unexpected, to the sort of things that people do expect, like historical reenactments, and then you throw into the mix things like the Euros final, which I came to watch. Very disappointed with the outcome, but the atmosphere was brilliant.
The programme at the castle is a really important curated programme. And it's made up of a lot of different things, like you've said. And like I said, it in the main, it helps support our core of what we do. And like you've said, we have a mixture of our own events, like the joust, for example. And I think what we're still experiencing as a venue, as I'm sure everyone else is in the sector, is, the long shadow of COVID. It did significantly transform the way that we approached our programme, actually. It used to be filled with a lot of high impact, punchy weekend events, and it's just too risky. It's just too risky now. So we really changed our approach, and that's why we brought a dragon to the castle, Lucy. So Lucy was part of our plans pre-COVID, actually, and because of the way things panned out, it was a slightly delayed. It was slightly delayed bringing her to the castle, but my goodness, bringing Lucy the dragon, I hadn't quite anticipated how successful that would be. I mean, her and Norman, because obviously she was that successful, we brought another dragon to the castle. They're very much kind of almost part of the permanent feature of the castle now. It's funny because in preparation for this podcast, I was like just going through Google and just reminding myself of all the key things that I needed to bring. I typed in Countess Lucy, actually. And it was so funny because in the AI generated content, Lucy and Norman made the headlines. And I just thought, you know what, that's such a quite compelling story, isn't it? Because we so often reflect on history and chapters, and yet here we were seeing something that we were doing, part of that language, part of that history. It's our chapter.
A combination of history and fantasy, really, that I think people would attract. And I know there have been some really evocative events there. I remember when the Poppies came, there was the 100th anniversary of the Somme. And just such an incredible setting for those things. And I think that's one of the things about the castle is the diversity of the events that you put on. So there must be some great successes you reflect on, which you've already mentioned some of those.
Yeah. And we were brave and bold enough to bring a Vivienne Westwood exhibition to the Victorian prison with the Sex Pistols mural, which was amazing because it just brought an entirely different audience to our site and also demonstrated the versatility of what we could be and the potential of what we could have. But the concerts have definitely been a great success. And you know it because just from the conversations that you're privy to, people are talking about it. And that was always, I don't know whether you know the Peace Hall in Halifax.
Yeah.
Similar Heritage Lottery funded attraction. And I followed very closely what they were doing because I just thought, wow, that's just transformational, what they've done and created there. So following that closely, and then obviously when Cuff and Taylor reached out to us, I was just like, absolutely, this has got to be something that we do because Lincoln, we're ready for it and Lincoln's ready for it.
I think there's something about, and it's something that's changed in my time in the city, that I think we've become a lot more ambitious about doing things like that. I think once upon a time, quite cautious.
Yeah.
And now we're a bit bolder. So
we're a bit bolder, but we're well versed, aren't we? We're incredibly experienced around delivering things like that there. And for me, the concerts were just the most exciting thing to bring to the castle, and one of my proudest moments, hands down. You know, I remember seeing Paloma Faith do her sound check on stage, and I just thought, Paloma Faith is at the castle. This is incredible. And so many people have recognised that and have been just really appreciative of it. And it was just so unusual because I think there was a concern about having the amount of infrastructure inside the castle grounds. Like, this is really going to jar. This is going to impact negatively on how people experience the day offer of what we do. But my goodness, people were sitting outside and they were just quite happy having their tea and coffee and looking at an empty stage because I think they felt part of something. They were inquisitive and curious and totally accepting of it because where else are you going to get Sting to play? Like, I mean, my goodness. Incredible.
So in complete contrast to those modern events, though, you're maintaining a 1,000-year-old building. So that must be a real challenge. Just making sure the fabric of because it's a scheduled ancient monument. It's there are lots of things you have to do, and you're trying to maintain that. So how do you deal with that challenge?
It's Lincolnshire limestone, John. It's like, my goodness. And we've actually got a series of works on the wall walks now, actually, because it just requires constant maintenance and repair. And you're right, those kind of projects cost money. Yep. And we're very fortunate that, as we're part of Lincolnshire County Council, and there's a commitment there. But I think for me, as long as the people that visit you and support you understand the importance of and have that awareness of where their money, when they buy a ticket, when they come and get a coffee, when they come to an event, they're supporting that ongoing preservation. And I think that's it, isn't it? Our fundamental core purpose is around being a custodian of that site, but preserving it for future generations. And and that's the message that you have to get across front and center, is getting people to care about that site. And you can do it in so many ways. But I said at the beginning, for me, it's about, I just want people to come into the castle. And that for me is part of that ladder of philanthropy, isn't it? Almost. Yeah. Just get them in the castle. We're a fortress, so we've kind of got a physical layout standing against us, and the fact that our shop and cafe is in a prison still frustrates me. But yeah, as soon as you get people in, that is the best. That's the start of that conversation. That's the start of that journey, and the start of people developing that emotional and supportive relationship to what you do.
And there must be quite a lot of partnership involved in that. I mean, obviously, it's the National Heritage and Historic Buildings organisations, their local partnerships that they all play a role in maintaining the building and helping to promote it.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely lots of organisations involved with Historic England, the legislative body that oversee what we do, and yeah, absolutely.
And then you have a role with the Greater Lincolnshire Economic Partnership, I believe. So tell us a little bit about that.
I do. Well, it's no surprise that as an ambassador for the great stuff that Lincolnshire delivers, I'm actually on the Visitor Economy Board for the LEP. So the LEP exists as a partnership between local authorities and businesses, and it's all about how we can drive economic growth in a certain region. There's lots of boards covering a whole swathe of areas, defence, workforce, ports, logistics, transport, all of that. And I sit on the Visitor Economy Board, which is a group of, very much like-minded, passionate individuals who really advocate for the value that our visitor economy brings to Greater Lincolnshire. And I've actually just co-led on a project that looks at recruitment to the visitor economy. And we've done a series of videos with a local company called Commuter Films, who are just incredible. And we've done a series of films that really help to promote what makes up the visitor economy, actually, because we use the word a lot, but actually it doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people. Yeah. So we came up with the strapline, be at the heart of it. And we used HEART as an acronym to kind of showcase all the various component parts of what we do. So hospitality, events, arts, retail, tourism, and sport. And we did spotlights on key individuals from each of those areas. And what we got was just a really incredible selection of videos and photography and case studies about passionate individuals in those specific areas that really helped to shine a spotlight on what a career in the visitor economy could look like for a lot of people, because it's very diverse and varied. And Be at the Heart of it works so beautifully because it talks about, I guess it's a reflection on the geographic element of it, Greater Lincolnshire. And also it kind of denotes that passion and natural kind of emphasis on customer service. You know, if you care about that, the visitor economy is a great place for you to work. So yeah.
And that takes us back to some of the things you said right at the start about your experience of doing all of those jobs and understanding all of the part they play in the visitor experience and how important it is.
Yeah.
And these are jobs that are sometimes undervalued and not really appreciated.
But they're such
but they're so
integral,
important.
and they have such an impact, and they drive significant growth. I mean, heritage, culture and the arts is like one of the, well, I think it's the main driver for overseas international tourism, like heritage. And you just think, my goodness, this city, this county has buckets and spades of that.
Yeah, it sometimes surprises me because I don't know that we get the volume of international visitors that other historic cities do. But when you bump into them when they're here, they are astonished.
Yeah,
they are amazed.
But I think that's the growth potential, John. And you're absolutely right. And I think that's how we managed to ride the wave of COVID a little better than some of the nationals in London, because our audience wasn't typically international.
Yeah.
We have a very strong local and loyal audience, but the possibility and potential for driving international tourism is huge.
And I think one of the things that Lincoln actually benefits from, and it's a balancing act really. I was in a city not sort of about 70, 80 miles north of here not so long ago, and it was absolutely heaving. And yet, and on the one hand, you'd like that volume of visitors.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it's not a great experience when you're actually there.
Tourism,
and it's sustainable tourism.
Sustainable tourism. But I think for a lot for Lincoln and Lincolnshire, and we touched on it before earlier in the conversation, is pride in place is like the best advocate, ambassador for driving that kind of tourism and growth. You know, the more people are proud to talk about, you know, what the city has to offer, the stories that it has to offer, that's when people start to go, oh yeah, something's happening. Something's happening in Lincoln.
Yeah, go and visit.
Yeah. And that's where we've kind of evolved our strapline from 1,000 years of history where it happened to also include and where it's happening. Because I think that really is a good kind of snapshot of what we're doing at the castle. You know, yes, our core focus will always be telling the stories of the site, being a custodian of those stories, preserving it for future generations. But actually, we can blend that and appeal and do more by creating the cultural hotspot that it's become through the programming and the content that we're bringing to the site. The two go hand in glove.
So we talk about 1,000 years of history, but what are the plans for the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Or even the next 5 years.
Let me tell you, John.
Or even the next 5 years.
The next 5 years. You know, so we've got some exciting plans in the next year coming up. You know, we're doing more concerts. We're going to do a spotlight on the Victorian prison, and that's going to really help shape all of the additional content and programming that we're doing next year. And I think there's the opportunity to do more and see how that develops really interestingly. But for me, I would love to see a big investment project back in that site, because there's still so much unlocked potential within that. And I think that's what I'd love to see is, you know, a National Lottery Heritage funded project into, you know, opening up the Georgian prison, telling that, because most of that is forms part of our back of house at the minute, but actually it's got equally interesting stories to tell. So yeah, that's definitely something that I'd like to see happen at the castle over the next few years.
So Lincoln Castle Revealed 2.
Yeah,
is
phase
what we
2.
Need to. Phase 2.
There you go. You heard it here first.
Yeah, heard it here first. An exclusive for the Hey Lincoln podcast. Wow, that's great. Well, thanks, Kim. That's been really fascinating.
Thank
really
you, John.
Interesting. Thank you for coming in. Now, we're asking each of our guests.
Oh, here we go. I knew there'd be something.
There'd be an ask. Yeah, there has to be an ask. No, we're asking each of our guests to, if you can sum up Lincoln in one word, what Lincoln means to you in one word, what would that word be?
Home. Because I just think that encompasses everything that we've talked about, you know, the physical kind of skyline and what you see, it all marks home for me. I mean, I live in Nottinghamshire, like I live in Bassetlaw. So I talk about, we'll do a circular loop here, John. I can see from my village, the Lincoln Cathedral and the Peak District. And I'm like, yeah, that's equidistant between my parents' family history. But yeah, it's home without a shadow of a doubt.
Kim, thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Brilliant talking to you.
Great.